Hey, everybody, this is Aaron Washington coming back at you guys for number 148 of the Business Casual Basketball Podcast. Excited for another podcast. Excited to be back with you guys to talk some hoops, as always. Joining me on the mic here is another contributor over at Unwrapped Sports, Alec Carr, a part of another awesome podcast that we have as a part of our network. Does some great work with Monique as also a part of our network. So I wanted to bring him on today because he is a supporter of the Sixers, the Philadelphia 76ers. As we know, their season just recently concluded at the hands of the Hawks. So I know that's fresh in his mind. So we're not going to retread over that series really that much. I just wanted to give a little bit of like an overview on kind of his performance and then kind of move on to the Sixers situation going into the offseason, some possible moves they can make to improve their situation. And then we're going to dive into the draft lottery a little bit. The draft lottery was just a couple of days ago here. And there's some teams that moved up, some teams that find themselves in a kind of advantage, a nice position, and then some other teams that maybe had a little bit of more of a disappointing finish as it pertains to the draft lottery. But before we get into that, guys, I just wanted to shout out a few sponsors that we have here at Unwrapped Sports and, just kind of acknowledge their contributions for us. And we have a few links that we want to offer you guys if you want to get started with some of the products and sponsors that we have a part of here at our network. But basically, the first one here is teespring.com/store/unwrapped. We have some products available for our podcast that we'd like for you guys to purchase if you have the opportunity. We have some apparel. We have some accessories that you guys can purchase over at that link. So if you are interested in supporting us, we would greatly appreciate it if you check out that link down there at the bottom at your ticker on your screen. Also, as a part of our network, we have some VIP tiers available at Unwrapped Sports, the section of patreon.com. So if you guys want to support us in that fashion, that's going to be available at the bottom of your screen. 3 different tiers that you can use to support us in our networks. We have some really cool prizes you guys can win if you want to support us, some other resources that are available to you if you want to support us. So be sure to check out that link down there at the bottom as well if you're interested in doing so. And then also mybookie.ag is a really cool supporter of ours. USN 100 is going to be the code that you guys can use if you want to get involved in the betting game. That's going to double your first deposit. So if you're looking to throw down some bets on the NBA playoffs here, the conference finals have started. Some other sports are getting into high gear. Whatever you guys are interested in on the sports front, be sure to check out that website if you want to get into the betting game and get a little bit of a head start if it's your first time. And then lastly, rxhemp.com has a code for us, rxhemp-USN. That's going to be 10% off your entire order. So if you guys want to check out some of the recovery products, that's going to be available to you, and you can get a little bit of a discount there as well. So be sure to check that out. If you're like me and you play one game of basketball and you're hurting the next 2 days, that might help you get back on your feet a little bit faster. So be sure to check out their products if that's a problem that you encounter being involved in sports. So for the first agenda of our podcast here today, Alec, I think it's about time to check out Philadelphia's situation. As I said before, we're not going to get too deep into the situation as it pertains to the playoff run. But, I mean, the big story for him, honestly, for Ben Simmons is how he performed at the free throw line, honestly. I went back and looked at some of his numbers, and he ended up taking 6 free throws a game, only hit at about a 31% clip. But basically, I think the big overarching theme with him and that team is his fit with Embiid, and then also his kind of struggles as a shooter. So going to you first, I want to get your honest opinion about Ben Simmons. Like, how do you feel about him as a player with this team after that playoff run? Are you down on him, being with this team, or do you feel like he just needs another chance to get his confidence back? How are you feeling about him after that playoff run and what we saw from him?
Yeah, so for me, and I always say this in all the podcasts I've ever been on, my dog is a special guest on all of them. I'm sorry, guys, if you hear barking, it's just my puppy. But also, it's a good question. The Ben Simmons, his fit with Philadelphia has always been the question, and always will be the question. And the news came out today from Woj. It was a Woj bomb that they're trying to figure it out. They want to keep working with him on his jump shot. They want him to be in Philadelphia. I don't know, man. For me, it's over. Personally, for me, it was a good experiment. It was fun. Ben Simmons is I'm not part of the Philadelphia fan base who thinks Ben Simmons sucks. I'm not part of the Philadelphia fan base who thinks Ben Simmons is bad and needs to just be sold to the the lowest bidder possible just to get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Simmons is a good player. He's a two-time All-Star. He's first-team All-NBA defense. He's literally a set jump shot away from being one of the most dominant players that we've ever seen.
For sure.
Will he ever develop that jump shot? I don't know. We had the Stephen A. Smith saying he talked to his close sources, whatever the hell that means with Stephen A. Smith. Sorry about that. He's kind of hated here in Philadelphia because of his time spent here.
I get it.
But it's a serious question to ask. Is he ever going to develop the jump shot? And we've done this for years and years and years with Ben Simmons. We said this year's going to be different. This year's going to be different. And it just isn't. And maybe he needs to be traded to realize that he needs a change in his personal team. He needs to get rid of his brother or cousin that's his shooting coach, who's reportedly not even very good at shooting himself. And just tells Ben Simmons, yes. He just says, you're doing great. And Ben Simmons is surrounded by yes men. And you know what it kind of reminds me of? To be honest with you, reminds me of early LeBron James. Early LeBron James was surrounded by a bunch of yes men who told him what he wanted to hear, and then he changed and said, I got to change. I got to get these people out of my life. Mm-hmm. And we saw what he developed into, obviously. He was great no matter what. Even as a rookie, he's one of the greatest rookies we've ever seen and probably will ever see. Yep. But it reminds me of that scenario. So Ben could go the LeBron James route and change his entire team. Or he could say, I'm going to keep it the way it is and turn into Allen Iverson and just never develop into the player that he needs to be. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I'm sold. I'm done. I'm done with the experiment. I think it's time to move on for him and for us because I think it's best for both parties, for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it's pretty telling that even you as a supporter of this team, hanging on, clinching on to hope as long as possible, even you're at the point where you think it's better to move on from him. I honestly think if we took a poll today and we asked 100 people whether they think the Sixers should move on from him or not, I think 95 people would say it's about that time. And it's unfortunate because, as you said, he's a great player. I mean, All-NBA, first team All-Defense this season. He has clear strengths as a player. You go look at his stats. If you exclude the points per game, you look at his other stats. He gets the steals, he gets the rebounds, he gets the assists. He can block shots. He can guard all 5 positions. So he has a lot to bring to a team. But the question is, do his strengths, or more importantly, his weaknesses, match up with what this team needs from him? And in that series, against the Hawks and the whole playoffs, it just seemed like he didn't bring what that team needed the most, which was that scoring punch, more spacing for Embiid. And that's why I think it's about time to explore another option, because it seems like the two of them defensively, it's awesome. You have a pointed attack defender, you have a rim protector. That's great. And that's why they finished as one of the best defensive teams in the league. But on the other end, they consistently finish. I don't think they ever really finished as an elite offensive team. And I think part of that is because of Ben Simmons' shortcomings. And then it's magnified in playoff games because teams will go all out to exploit weaknesses and take advantage of him not being able to shoot free throws that well. And for that perspective, it makes me think, I think it's a mental thing at this point, right? And you mentioned that with LeBron's story, he needed to change the scenery to discover that. Cleveland wasn't a place for him. And I'm sure you can attest to this. Sixers fans are ruthless. And I've seen Sixers fans boo their own players in their own arena at a home game. That's how brutal you guys are. I just don't know if Ben is capable of withstanding that mentally.
Ben got booed during the playoffs. So
yeah, I remember.
And he'll continue to get booed as long as he misses free throws. Philadelphia is the hardest city to play in, and it's the easiest city to play in. If you show up and you do your work, and if you can prove that you're working hard, we're going to love you. It doesn't matter what your skill level is. We'll love you. I mean, this is a city that fell in love with TJ McConnell, for Christ's sake. There's still some people who think now this is the fringe of Philadelphia sports fans, but I have seen we need to bring TJ McConnell, get Ben out of here and bring in TJ McConnell.
Oh, Lord.
And that's just because the only reason is because TJ McConnell is bringing lunch pail to work and I'm going to outwork everybody I can. And Ben Simmons just isn't that guy, and he's the kind of, to me, he's the tough guy that doesn't want to show, that doesn't ever do anything wrong, that doesn't want to admit that he's doing something wrong. When in reality, I think I read somewhere he had the worst free throw percentage out of any NBA player ever.
Oh, I didn't really know that, but I guess it makes sense.
I think it was out of 70 attempts, out of 70 free throw attempts, he was the worst free throw shooter in NBA playoff history this year.
That's makes sense. 30%. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter what team you're on. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's you're absolutely right. And I will say this till my deathbed. Ben Simmons is a great player in this league. Great
Absolutely.
player. Jump shot, no jump shot. He's a great player in this league. And I'll miss him because he's fun to watch in transition and stuff. But, I think the offseason plan for the 76ers this year is trade Ben Simmons. That's the plan right now. There's no other plan. Trade Ben Simmons and keep some of your role players. That's about it.
Agreed. I think we're in consensus on that. I think most people would agree with that take. Alec, I think you have a supporter here. Matt thinks you should be the GM of the team. So if they're going to look for an opening in the coming years, be sure to throw your name in the hat. You might be able to get an interview. So it's worth a shot.
I keep trying to tell them that. I keep trying to tell them. They won't listen to me in Philadelphia.
Maybe they should, man. I think they'd be better off for it. But, honestly, I think if we're going to move on from this season and we're going to try to look forward to what the Sixers might do in the future, this is a good place to start with this comment. So if we're going to look at trade targets, we're going to look at who you could get in exchange for Ben Simmons. Let's go ahead and put you on the spot here, man. I don't know if you've thought about this before as possible targets, but if you were the GM right now, let's say that, that your people advocating for you to be GM, that works out. If you're in that position, who would you look at bringing back for him? Is it just a starting level guard? Does it have to be someone on the cusp of an all-star guard in replacement? What's going through your mind if you're trying to find someone to replace Ben?
So right now, I've been kind of a supporter of trade Ben Simmons for the right guy. Period. I've never said Ben Simmons is untouchable. The only guy who's untouchable to me on this team is Mr. Joel Embiid because he's just that damn good.
Process himself. Yep.
Right. And when he's healthy, he's arguably the most dominant player in all of the NBA. So I've always been thinking. I always think about who to trade Ben Simmons for. It's one of my favorite pastimes since he's been on the team.
Okay.
So my first call is right now. My first call is Portland. Kick the wheels on CJ McCollum. But it feels like his name gets thrown out there every single season.
It does. It really does.
And it's not really. It doesn't seem Portland's ever serious about moving him. It's more of let's see what we can get for him, and if we can't move him for what we want, we'll just keep him because he's a really good player.
Yeah.
But the lowest return I would take is an all-star. Now, I fully acknowledge that means, especially off of this offseason, that means Ben Simmons is not going to be good enough to get CJ McCollum straight up. It just won't. So that means throwing in 2 draft picks. That means throwing in a young future starter like Thibault or Maxey or Milton. I'm willing to do that. You got to get a starting all-star on this team. Period. And guys, and like I said, I'd start with Portland. My dream guy would be Zach LaVine because I think he's a perfect fit for this team. You move Maxey. Then your offseason, you go get Zach LaVine as soon as possible. Your offseason goal is to get Maxey ready to start. Then you got Maxey, LaVine. Maybe you hold on to Danny Green, maybe you don't. But then you got Toby and then Embiid, and that team is that's the perfect match. That you got your ball distributor Maxey, who's not afraid to shoot, who's not afraid to try to take over a game when he needs to. He's not afraid to make a big play. Then you got LaVine, who's shown that he's clutch, even though he's playing for unfortunately, the terrible Chicago Bulls. Zach LaVine has shown that he's clutch. He's shown that he can improve. He's shown that he's working on his offensive game at least. Not so much defense, but
Yeah, there's other players that can compensate for that. I think they can address that elsewhere.
That's the other thing too, is that with the Sixers, and I don't know how you feel about this, trading Ben Simmons would hurt the defense certainly. You're talking about one of the best defensive players in the NBA right now, but they still have a really good defense without him.
Right.
I mean, Toby's defense has gotten better every single year since he got here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if his stats support that, but when you watch the game, you go, wow, he has become a way better on-ball defender than he was.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, those are the two guys that come to mind. There's some other guys that I think about that maybe might be all-stars if they're in the right situation. A guy like Buddy Hield comes to mind. Sacramento has talked about trading him for some time, for like 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they'd be willing to pair De'Aaron Fox and Ben Simmons up together. That just
I don't think so.
Work.
No.
And then something I really thought about that would be really funny, probably not possible because the team wouldn't be willing to do it, but I think he actually fits the roster perfectly better than the player down there. If you go back and you get Joel Embiid's best friend, former Philadelphia 76er himself, Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat.
Oh, man. See, now you're coming at me, man, because that's my guys right there. I'll be the GM, so you call me. I'm the GM of the Heat. I will respectively decline that one. I'll just have to hang up within 10 seconds. I'm sorry. Just all these gonna work.
You guys got all those shooters. That's my thing. You guys got all those shooters. Could you imagine a distributor at that level Ben Simmons is on that team? Oh, my God.
That would be incredible, for sure.
It would just be rain and buckets. It would just be rain and buckets.
For sure. It's a tough blow, man, because Jimmy's like the heart and soul, and he does everything. And I know he's not a great shooter himself, but yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting scenario. I will say that Ben would be, I mean, he would average 10 assists a game for sure. Just flinging to Duncan and Tyler and those guys, that would be fun for sure. The problem is you got Bam and you got Ben, and it's like Bam already has problems being aggressive and shooting. So I'm like, I don't know how to work on offense, but I like that you threw that out there just as why not.
And Pat Riley's not trading Jimmy Butler anytime soon.
Oh yeah. That was the big fish, man. That was the grab of the past 5-10 years right there, man. Went all out for him. He's kind of like the staple of South Beach right now. But if we go and zoom in on those two guys that you mentioned before, starting with CJ, looking at the numbers, it makes sense on paper from a salary standpoint, with CJ being at about, I just checked it earlier, making $30 million for this coming season for 21-22, and being a little bit more at 33. So it's within a margin. I think it's acceptable for both teams. But as you said, Ben's value has taken a hit after that playoff run. So you're going to have to throw in a sweetener. But luckily for Philadelphia, they have the first round picks to offer. Looking at it now, you guys have the next 4, or I guess let's say 3, three or four, starting with 21, going to 24. All those first rounders are available, so you can throw in one of those. You have a second rounder from New York for this draft you can throw in. You have a couple of second rounders for 23 and 24. So, I mean, a first, a couple of seconds you could throw in there. Those are definitely options for you guys if you want to get back CJ and you want to make it a little more fair from their perspective. And then the LaVine one is really interesting to me because I'm with you. I think he's just what you guys need. The perfect shot creator, the perfect fearless shooter, difficult shot maker. That's the other thing. I mean, he can make almost any shot that is presented on the court just because he has that ability to concentrate and just being able to elevate. It's really incredible. But with his salary coming in for next season, at about 19 and a half, you're going to need somebody else in return. So Chicago can throw in Al-Farouq Aminu, just opt into his player option for $10 million. So the two of them together, that's about $30 million. So that's about the same salary that CJ would command. So something like that can work if you're looking to do a 2-for-1 deal. So there's options there. I think the money can work. It's just about, do they want Ben Simmons and that team. And for Chicago, I mean, it kind of makes sense. If you have Vucevic, he can spread the floor. He doesn't have to stay in the paint. He loves to shoot. So honestly, either of those deals, I think, could work out for the other team. But I think Zach LaVine is the guy. I think if you're going to pick one or the other, it makes a lot of sense from the Philly perspective.
Yeah, and Zach LaVine has just been on my radar. Honestly, it's funny. All the guys that I want, all the guys that are like my dream guys, are guys the Sixers could have drafted. Like, I would love to go get Michael Porter Jr. I would love to get Zach LaVine, who I wanted them to draft late in that round when they had the 2 first-round draft picks. It's just funny how they could trade Ben Simmons for a guy they could have drafted in the first place.
Right.
And the other thing is about the Bulls, though, is they're not willing to admit it's kind of time to start over. I love Kobe White, but he's not really ever, and it's not necessarily his fault. There's just so many good point guards in the NBA now, and he just doesn't quite get up to that bar. He's shown flashes here and there. And for the Bulls, I think, bringing in Vuk, if you trade for Ben Simmons, it's like, all right, let's start over. Let's go out and get shooters. Let's go out and get our team with some shooters. I was actually playing around with a sign and trade because LaVine the Bulls have talked about extending him this offseason with the max deal just to make him happy so he doesn't go anywhere. So if they do that and then trade him for Ben Simmons, but I just don't know. I don't know if the Zach LaVine thing is realistic, more so because of the Chicago Bulls mindset of we're never ready to fully start over. We just kind of are going to stay in this mediocrity for a while.
Yeah, I think if we're looking at the Bulls, I wouldn't necessarily say they have to completely start over. I think they would have to reevaluate the type of team they've built. They're going to have to kind of shuffle some pieces around, which I think they can do. Some guys are coming up on free agency. So there's definitely options they can do to retool that team a little bit. I think it's doable, but like you said, I don't know if they want to go in that direction. You're going to have to put some different guys around Ben Simmons to compensate for some of his shortcomings. And I mean, it really does come down to, do these other teams believe that he can be that guy that's unafraid of the free throw line, maybe bump his percentage to 70. I mean, if he was a 70% shooter, I think the team can live with that. I don't think we're asking for a lot from him. We're not saying like, hey, go out here and be Steph Curry shooting from 30 feet. I mean, if you can make a 3 or 2 every once in a while, if you can hit a mid-range jumper, I mean, just look at Giannis. Giannis is not a knockdown shooter, but he's implemented a little bit of a fadeaway in his game from mid-range. He's not afraid to shoot. I mean, sometimes he shoots too much, but hit 2 or 3 threes every once in a while. I don't think it would hurt anybody. So those are definitely interesting targets. A couple of other ones that I've thrown around a little bit, and of course there's flaws with these guys too. D'Angelo Russell is another guy I've seen. I think it would be okay for the Sixers, but if you're looking at the Wolves, I think they took so much time to try to get him in the first place, to pair him with Towns as a good friend. I can't see them jettisoning him already. They barely played together after all their injuries. So money-wise, that works too. I think Russell makes about 30. So again, that's right in that range of Ben's 33. That could work. His value has also gone down. So, I mean, they both, could meet in the middle when it comes to their value right now on the court. But I don't know. I couldn't see the Wolves doing it. What do you think about that one?
Honestly, I don't think the Sixers do that. I don't think either team really wants that. I get the on paper how it looks. And maybe this is my bias about D'Angelo Russell. I've never been a big D'Angelo Russell fan. I think he needs to take a lot of shots in order to be successful. Mm-hmm. And even then, he's still a streaky shooter. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I would never say that about him. He has proven me. I thought he was going to be a bust coming out of the draft. Personally, I did. And he's proven me wrong, and I'll always admit that when I'm wrong about players, that he is not a bust. He's a legitimate borderline, probably borderline level all-star in the NBA. The other issue with him is, the 76ers already have our number one player has health issues, D'Angelo Russell has missed some time in the past. We don't want to bring in a guy like that. And the one thing I always question is his locker room presence. I know the Lakers thing is kind of a joke and has become a joke of what he did in the Lakers. Yeah. But it always seems, even in Minnesota, you don't hear a lot of stories that he's become this great locker room presence. Whereas guys like, CJ and even Levine to an extent and Buddy Hield, and these guys are always, team guys. They're team first guys. And that's what Doc's going to be looking for. That's what Morey's going to be looking for. And I don't know about I feel like the personality of D'Angelo Russell and Joel Embiid will clash. I don't think they'll like each other. I don't think they'll like playing with each other because of it. It is interesting though. It would definitely pique a lot of other Sixers fans' interest because there's this feeling that we missed out on D'Angelo Russell in the draft and we wanted him, and a lot of Sixers fans out there who still believe we need him.
Yeah, it's like it would definitely be an opportunity to run it back. It's funny that a lot of these guys we're throwing out there are guys that the Sixers had an opportunity to bring in. So, I mean, it's definitely an opportunity to run it back. I mean, if the Sixers wanted to do that. But yeah, there's definitely concerns with him. It's just difficult to construct these deals because you're trying to find players that A, make a similar salary so you can make the money work, and then B, kind of what you guys are looking for, or I guess with the need that has arisen from Ben Simmons' shortcomings. So trying to tie that together, it's just hard to find guys that kind of fit that bill. But one last guy that I thought of at the last minute that initially I wasn't really considering, what if we went to Houston, and I know this guy's had health problems of his own, he's just coming back from them, but John Wall coming from Houston, they're looking for young players. They're trying to kind of rebuild that team. Ben Simmons would be an interesting fit there to kind of jumpstart that whole process. John Wall isn't really in match with that. He makes a lot of money. I do understand that. But if we were to look at this and say Ben Simmons is 30 in the low 30s as far as salary, you throw in George Hill, it's non-guaranteed, so they don't have to bring him back. That's another 10. So, once you do that, it almost matches, just looking at it earlier. So something else I just kind of threw around. I'm not sure if it would really work. I don't know how the Sixers fans would feel about John Wall, but definitely has some explosiveness left, has some defensive capabilities. He's not as bad defensively as some of the other guys we mentioned. Great passer, great distributor, just like kind of Ben is. And his jump shot is kind of a weakness, but it's nowhere near as bad as Ben Simmons. He can knock down some threes. So, might not be the move that kind of just automatically just puts you over the hump, but something I just kind of threw around because the Sixers clock is ticking. I know he's an older player, but you got to get something going now while Embiid has some kind of health remaining. And, he's a veteran, he's been around, he can offer some things. So, just
I personally love John Wall. I always have. He's always been one of my favorite players in the league ever since, he came in and had the dance named after him. I've always been a big fan of his game. He's the kind of guy that does give you 110%. He has worked on his jump shot because when he came out, I think he shot 25% from three-pointer his rookie season or something like that. Something like that, but he's gotten it up. I think it's in the low 30s, maybe high 20s right now. His health is definitely an issue. The other issue is the Rockets owner had made it pretty clear during the trade deadline that he is not trading with Daryl Morey and wants nothing to do with him. Because he walked away from the Rockets. He gave up. He saw the writing on the wall that Harden was going to want out and Russ was going to want out. And he was like, I'm out before this happens. But I mean, I think the Rockets would be stupid not to listen to that. I don't know if it's a Sixers move. I love John Wall. I really, really do. John Wall, the difference between John Wall and Ben Simmons, the biggest difference is John Wall's strength is the pick and roll game, which will only help Embiid get open and stop people from doubling him. And the biggest issue with the Sixers, and not just the playoffs and just in general, is that when Embiid has the ball, who's ever covering Ben goes and doubles him.
Yep.
That's what happens. You bring in a guy like John Wall who can run that pick and roll with him, who's not afraid to take that jump shot, who's not afraid. And listen, his 3-pointers aren't that great,
right?
But come crunch time, come big game time, John Wall has always been clutch. Always.
For sure.
So I mean, I personally would listen to that. I don't know if I'm playing GM. It's just because of the age and the injuries. If that's my best option, only option, say Portland says no, the Bulls say no, then yeah, I'm doing it because that's a better recipe for winning a championship than Ben Simmons. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parts of it I like. I mean, I just kind of thought of it like at the 11th hour before we did the show, but I was like, that could work for both sides if the Rockets are getting a guy that's, 24 years old, almost 25. So, I mean, he's younger than Christian Wood, I believe, not super old, still kind of fits into that timeline, has a lot of skills, a lot to offer to that team. So, I mean, honestly, it could work. I know the Sixers would kind of be hesitant to take on $4 million for the next 3 years, but if you're trying to win a championship, you kind of have to put that aside, and you have to look at what he offers on the court. And if it's what you're looking for, do you believe he gives you a chance? Hey, I would go out there and do it. And I know there's that dynamic between Daryl Morey and everything. Didn't consider that initially, but it could be something that benefits both sides. So I think if we're doing a ranking, I think I would say LaVine, and then probably him as second as far as who I'd go after as a GM, just looking at it from all sides. So definitely a lot on their plate for the Sixers. Wish you guys the best. I hope that, Embiid kind of finds the support that he needs because, I mean, he went out there, he gave it his all. And either Ben needs to get his act right or they need to get him out of town. So a lot riding on the Sixers offseason. But Daryl Morey, I mean, no better guy to have in that chair making the decisions. He's an absolute genius, and I'm sure he's going to make something out of nothing as he's done before. So looking at, speaking of the Rockets, I mean, they just got done participating in the draft lottery, and Hakeem Olajuwon was a part of that whole sequence. And it looked like for a second they might grab the first pick, but they ended up with second, which is nowhere near as bad as it could have been, considering if they had missed out on the top 4 picks, they would have lost their pick to OKC. That would have been a disaster after the season they had in Houston. So they got number 2. Pistons ended up with number 1. So if we're going to break this down and just look at some of the big stories that happened from the draft lottery, I think the first one has to start with Detroit because, believe it or not, they haven't had a first-round pick in a long time. And by a long time, I mean 50-plus years. 1970 was their last selection, number 1. And they hadn't even moved up in the draft since 2003, since they took a guy by the name of Darko Milicic, which I'm sure the NBA junkies will recognize that name. Didn't really work out so well for them. But they have a chance to make do on that.
They could have had Carmelo, too. Just a reminder to Pistons fans, they could have had Carmelo.
Oh, man, you had to rub it in, man. Just had to rub it in. But, I mean, every team's going to make mistakes, bad draft selections. But they found themselves back in the position to draft a pretty good player. This is a good draft class. A lot of guys at the top could be franchise-altering guys. And I think that Cade Cunningham fits the bill. Looking at Cade's best fits before the draft, I wasn't as thrilled with Detroit as some of the other teams like OKC or maybe Toronto, but I think he still has a lot to offer to this team. And if they can, finesse some of the other moves in that roster, I think he can be a really good player for him. So honestly, I guess we can keep this short. Cade, is it the guy for the team? Should they even consider anybody else? I mean, if I were them, I probably wouldn't. Just looking at best talent available, you got to go for it, right? Not even hesitate.
And Cade's the kind of, he's one of those prospects where you draft him and you figure it out. Like, you don't worry about it. You just draft him and you figure it out afterwards.
The rest later.
I mean, listen, if Cade and Jeremy Grant can't play together, then you trade Jeremy Grant. As much as good as Jeremy Grant has gotten, he is not a franchise-altering player like Cade Cunningham is,
right? And
never will be.
He tried to be this season with as much as he was shooting and handling the ball. He was like, I'm going to try to be the guy, but obviously he dipped later on in the season, and I think reality set in. It's like, I'm not quite a number 1, not that type of guy.
Right. And I mean, I've been watching it. Listen, he was part of our tank rosters in Philadelphia, so I've been
Yeah,
watching Jerry Grant since he was
process
young.
OG, man.
And he's gotten way better, but he's still got some glaring holes in his game. So if that's the reason you don't draft Kate Cunningham, Detroit just continues to make mistakes. But I don't think they will. This is a no-brainer.
Yeah,
You draft Kate Cunningham, you figure it out later.
every time, every time. So I think that's pretty clear. He's off the table. So if you kind of go from there, and we're back to Houston, they're on the clock. Honestly, I'm just looking at who they can pick to kind of fit in that roster. Honestly, I think Evan Mobley makes a lot of sense for him as a big man that's very versatile. I think if you have him, you pair him with Wood, I think that's a great front line. I think there's a lot of versatility there. They can both shoot, they can both defend, they can both run a pick and roll. I think it's a very modern front court. And I mean, honestly, from Houston's perspective, that's a great pick, but there's other directions they can go in. I think if you're looking at Suggs or you're looking at Green, I think there's a lot of great options there. I would say either Mobley or Green, one of those guys, if I'm in their position. Green being a great scorer in the backcourt, you can kind of start to fill that in a little bit in that roster. So I think that's a great situation for them to be in, and they can't really go wrong because they got their pick. They didn't lose it. So I guess from here, it's just trying to figure out which part of their roster they want to fortify first. They want to fortify the front line, the backcourt. I guess that's the question they got to ask themselves. But which direction you think they should go if you're trying to consider that roster?
So we were doing good agreeing about everything, but I think until now, I think Mobley's a mistake for them personally.
Oh, okay.
I think
okay.
I love Mobley. He's definitely my second, maybe third favorite prospect in the entire draft. I think his draft class is absolutely loaded with talent. I don't think Christian. The reason I don't think Christian Wood and Mobley can play together is a little bit different than what other people may say. They're both big, they're both athletic big. I just think they like playing in the same spots as the floor. I think they like starting at the same spots as the floor, and they might just kind of like how when Dwight and Powell tried to play together in the Lakers. Powell liked setting up where Dwight liked setting up, and that was a huge problem for them. And I think that could be a big problem for them. Now, this is a thing where, if you like Mobley, you make the pick. You figure it out later. But
right.
I think a guy like Green, Suggs, I think you're right with that. I think they go with Green, but best player available. I think they definitely drafting Mobley is not out of the realm of possibility because I think he is the best player available. And if you're drafting that early, I mean, Christian Wood has gotten way better, but who knows? He might be one of those guys that gets way better, then all of a sudden falls off the map because he is kind of coming out of nowhere. Again, funny, another 76ers tank player.
Again, man, it's like they're everywhere.
But if they go with Mobley, that tells me they don't really believe in Christian Wood that much.
I can see that, yeah.
So this is the one for me where it's kind of a toss-up. I don't really know where they're going to go with this pick, but I think the pick to make is Green here.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's definitely arguments to be made for fortifying the backcourt because you can't really go wrong with those backcourt prospects that you mentioned. I think they would both be great fits here. Honestly, either way they go, I think would be a solid move. And then honestly, what if the Rockets look at Wood and they look at what he brings to this team and they say, he's 25, he's going to be probably close to 26 by the time the season starts. He had a great season. His stock has risen considerably. What if we sell high on him and get back somebody that's maybe a little bit earlier in the development curve? Maybe that's a better fit for Mobley in the front court. I think it really just depends on how they think Wood is going to pan out for this team. Do they see him as a long-term piece, as in like 3, 4, 5 years down the road, or do they see him as like a kind of like a bridge to the next era that makes them competitive, but can generate more assets for them in the long term? So If they think he's the guy, then maybe they do go with the guard. But if they don't, maybe Mobley comes in and they try to figure out something with Wood. So a lot of options for Houston. I think it's hard to kind of pinpoint where they want to go just because they're still starting out in this rebuild. I mean, it's literally like probably you could say this is year one because last year was like a transitional period. So there's a lot of different directions they can go. It's just about what they prioritize right now.
Yeah, and don't be surprised if they find a willing trade partner who trades them a star. I mean, Houston's an organization who has always been on the superstar hunt. So, I mean,
sure.
we don't know. We haven't gotten to the part of the season where the offseason where, you know, all the stars start demanding trades. Who knows? Maybe Paul George wants out. Maybe Damian Lillard wants out, which I doubt would ever happen, but maybe it happens. And they say, well, here's the second overall pick. You have all of these prospects. Give us the superstar back, and you can have the second overall pick. And they have a lot of future picks, too, because of the I can't even think right now. Because of the Russ trade and because of the Harden trade. They have so many picks. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw – they might even say – look at a guy like Davion Mitchell later on and say, hey, let's trade back and just draft Davion Mitchell because, you know, we got a 3-point shoot. We got a good point guard or shooting guard, whatever you classify him as, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of the future right there. And we can just stash more picks and just continue to collect assets.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of good that can come out of the situation for Houston, and those picks are going to give them even more options going forward. So I'm really excited to see who they select at number 2 because that's going to give us a kind of like an insight onto how they're going to approach this rebuild and moves that can possibly be coming this offseason and into next season. A team that's a little bit farther along, I think they want to start competing here probably the next year or two. Cleveland finds themselves back at number 3. If we go back and we do a little bit of like a rewind in their history, 2 years ago, 2019 draft, they were at 5th. They drafted Darius Garland. That fit with Colin Sexton, I don't think is going to work out long term. But Cleveland finds themselves getting top 5 picks all the time. I mean, Wiggins wasn't that long ago. Bennett wasn't that long ago. Kyrie before that. So Cleveland, I don't know what they got in the air there. I don't know what kind of rituals they do before the draft, but it seems to work because they keep on hitting these high picks, probably more than a lot of teams. I mean, we just looked at the Pistons. Their last, top pick was 03. And here the Cavs, since then, have probably had like 4 or 5 of those picks. So, they're probably in the same situation as far as like who they might draft is Houston. I think they either go Green or Suggs. I think they try to move on from Colin Sexton. I think that the team has had some issues with him. Teammates have not been a big fan of him. So I think that's kind of like the writing on the wall that they're going to try to find somebody that fits a little bit better with Garland. I think Garland stays. I think he's progressing really nicely and they like his game. That's kind of like how I look at it. I don't know if you're as down. I mean, I'm not down on Colin Sexton. I love that guy. But as far as his time with this team, the days might be numbered, honestly. But are you as pessimistic as me?
I have a fun scenario for you.
All right.
That I've actually been thinking about for the past 2 days. What if we get to the draft, Ben Simmons isn't gone, and all of a sudden Cleveland's up and on the clock, and they call Philadelphia and say, we'll give you Colin Sexton. The draft pick is not available. Sorry. It's just not – I'm not saying they're trading their draft pick, but let's just say they call the Philadelphia 76ers maybe the day before the draft, say Colin Sexton, Ben Simmons, we'll make them throw in Kevin Love, make the money work. I don't have it in front of me, but I think that's how the money would have to work. Kevin Love has to be involved in that trade.
Yeah.
And then say, perfect scenario for them, Houston doesn't go Mobley. Now you got Ben Simmons, Garland, and say they go draft Mobley after that. I think that's a really interesting scenario. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I love Colin Sexton on Philadelphia.
Me too, yeah. It could work, for sure.
It could work. It doesn't fit my all-star mold because I don't think Colin Sexton is an all-star even on Philadelphia.
But he could get there. Maybe he still has a little bit more growth left.
He's still really young. Then you got Kevin Love, too, who can come off the bench and really fill up fill that bucket getting spot off the bench for Philadelphia. Anyway, I'll digress. If they don't go that route, I think this is hard for Cleveland. I think this is where you may see, if they don't move Sexton before the draft, I think this is where you see a team move back for sure. I mean, are you really going to go Suggs if you still got Sexton and Garland on the same team? Now you got 3 guards. What are you supposed to do with that? Mobley's not there. What are you supposed to do with that pick if Mobley's not there and you can't get a guy like Ben Simmons?
Right. Even if Mobley is there, you just traded for Jarrett Allen. That's been really good on that front line. So it's interesting right now with their situation. I mean, I know Allen is coming up on a new contract. Maybe they let him go. Maybe Collins gone. I know this for sure. I think somebody's going to be gone before the start of next season. Just looking at the roster and who they have available to draft at that spot, unless they move down, like you said, that's definitely an option for them. So it's going to be interesting to follow that storyline because I think it's about time for Cleveland to make that jump. Similar to the Hawks, I think they're getting to that point where it's like year 3 now of this thing. So they're like, okay, we want to see some wins. We want to see you at least get close to a playoff appearance. I think at this point is what they're looking for. But let's go ahead and finish this out with 5th. This conversation here, because this is where the Magic are drafting, and this is a pick that they got from Chicago, since Chicago was top 4 protected and it fell out of that range. So the Magic have 2 top 8 picks. That's pretty impressive in this draft. So if we're looking at who they could draft, it's difficult for sure, because Kumaga is a great prospect, but Jonathan Isaac is there. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. They still believe in Isaac. The guards could be gone. Mobley's probably going to be gone. So I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of options for them there, but again, they're early in the rebuild, so they can go in any direction. But any kind of initial reactions from you is like where they might go in this process?
This is the best player available, I think. Jonathan Isaac, I love him as a prospect. He said that Caleb at Unwrapped will love this. He's one of the few Florida guys I've actually really fell in love with.
Okay.
It's just his health is an issue. He for whatever reason struggles to finish seasons. He struggles to get on the court and stay on the court. When he's there, he looks really, really good, and you see those. You see that and go, oh wow, that's an all-star. That's a guy that can really, really help change a team. But then he misses the next 5 games after that, and it's like, well, what the hell, man? And then they also, Cole Anthony played really well in his rookie year, especially being thrusted into the starting role sometimes, and sometimes being on the bench. And they invested in Markelle Fultz. So like, this is one of those scenarios where it's like they've invested in all these people at different positions, but none of them are really working out exactly how they want them to be. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, you don't even consider position. You just go best player available. Whoever is at the top of their board, if it's still Suggs and one of the other guards, fine. Figure it out. If that means moving on from Fultz or moving on from Anthony, which would probably be moving on from Anthony to Fultz's injury, I don't think he has much value around the league right now.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Which sucks because he was just hitting his groove right before the injury.
Sucks.
I was a huge Fultz fan coming out. But
he looked great.
But he was finally starting to kind of look like his college self. And then he got hurt again. So I think they would probably have to move on from Anthony if they do go guard. They could go again. The only thing I don't think they do is they're not going to draft a guy. They're not going to draft a small forward. They're just not. Jonathan Isaac is just too good when healthy.
Mm-hmm.
You hope that he's kind of like got the Steph Curry factor where he's injured during the beginning of the season, but then ends up being the player you thought he would be if he gets healthy.
Yeah.
Because that's what people forget about Steph Curry. He missed like his first 3 years, man, because of his ankle problem. So you hope that's what happens with Jonathan Isaac if I'm the GM of the Magic, and I just stay away from small forwards in general. Small forwards, power forward, I just stay away from them and go, let's take best player available as a guard. If there's then maybe somehow Mobley falls to them. I don't see how that would happen. But yeah, this is definitely best player available pick for sure.
Yeah, definitely. When you're that early in the development cycle, that's pretty much that should be your course of action if you're trying to rebuild this team. And I'd say if I'm a Magic fan, I'm just praying that they find a guy that can be a top 20 player in the league, because they haven't really had that. Dwight was that a decade ago. Shaq was that a decade before that or more. So they've just been lacking that elite guy. I mean, Tobias Harris, good player. Oladipo, good player. Fultz, the guys like that. Okay, cool. They're good third, fourth guys. But you need somebody that you can build a franchise around, get people interested in the team again, get fans back out. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in that whole rut that they were in for the past 5 years, where it was like, Fournier and guys like that, Vucevic, they just couldn't get out of that like 8th seed kind of
going all the way back to Marcin Gortat as their starter. Remember?
Oh yeah, Gortat, man, that whole saga with him coming up behind Dwight. Yep. But that's kind of how things have been for them. It's like they find good players, but they can't find the guy. That's what they need. So big time pressure on the Magic for this draft. They need a franchise player. History is not on their side recently, but hey, it's a new year. It's a new start. Who knows what's going to happen? But that about sums it up. Don't really have time to go through the rest of the lottery, but there's a lot going on for these other teams too. Golden State has a lot riding on this. They have a couple of picks, and you go down the line. It's going to be fun to watch who ends up getting these picks. Toronto at 4. For some reason, I completely glossed over Toronto, but they're right there at 4, and they have a lot of options at their disposal. But that's about it, guys. I appreciate everybody for tuning into this podcast. It's been a great episode. My man Alec here. It's been a fun ride this season, and it's only going to get better. So hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Alec, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for joining me. It's been fun. If the people want to find you, your podcast, go ahead and shout out your what you got going on social media for the people.
Yeah, everybody. You can follow me at AlecTDCar on Twitter. That's my personal account. Like I always say on Fights Unwrapped, I got some crazy ideas that come out of that account. Some trade scenarios. I'm going to be working up some crazy Ben trade scenarios that I'm going to be posting on there. Some that might not make any sense, some that will really kind of be a joke and make you laugh, and others will be dead serious. And then you can also find me. We're more just retweeting headlines right now until we figure out what we can do with our own. 4th and 26 pod is now 4th and 26 Sports. Retweeting headlines, just trying to get the Philadelphia news out there from Philadelphia as quickly as possible. And then, of course, you can find us on our new night and time at Fights Unwrapped. Our podcast weekly live show is now on Mondays at 6 o'clock, not Wednesdays. So please don't look for us on Wednesdays because we will not be there, and you'll be sitting there wondering why. So again, that's Mondays at 6 o'clock. And then, as I always say on Fights Unwrapped, please follow Unwrapped Sports Network. It's what brings guys like me and Aaron together. And I say this all the time. I love it because if you want Chicago news, we got people in Chicago. You want New York news, we got people in New York. You want Miami news, we got people in Miami. So it's really unique in that way. So please follow Unwrapped Sports Network as well.
You heard the man, guys. Go give us a follow. Check us out. We have pretty much any support you're looking for. We got you covered. So for business casual, BC Basketball 2 is our handle on Twitter and Instagram. bcbasketball.info is our website. A lot of content coming this summer. Be sure to check us out. You're not going to want to miss the features we have coming up for you guys. So until next time, guys, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy these NBA playoffs as they get even better by the game. We hope to see you on the next installment of the BCB podcast. So take care, everybody, and we'll see you real soon.